Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, today in just 5 minutes, we want to find out what investors should be thinking about in terms of US stocks. Remember, this is general information only, and you should seek professional advice before making investment decisions.
Michael, Wall Street is home to some of the biggest and most well-known companies in the world. Josh Gilbert is a market analyst at social investment network eToro. Josh, how did investors fare on US markets last year? I suppose it's the story of tech stocks and non-tech stocks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, it depends on what side of the fence you sit on there. But I think, 2023 brought a change in the winds. We had inflation cooling. We had the end of the Fed's sort of rate hiking cycle coming into sort of view, which really spurred sort of relief rallies, the rate cut trade as well. But ultimately, the sort of preferences really shifted strongly in favor of sort of tech stocks again. And what a year it was for sort of tech, that good that we even saw a rebrand to the Magnificent Seven and how magnificent they were in 2023. They sort of single-handedly drove S&P 500 returns, last year. We saw huge earnings growth in Q3 2023, 57% earnings growth from the Magnificent Seven compared to just 4% for the rest of the 497 stocks. So really well and truly leading the earnings recovery as we headed into sort of this year, but also really helped to sort of support their lofty valuations. And a big part of that growth obviously came from AI, which was sort of the buzzword on Wall Street this year. But that was sort of evident really in those earnings that I mentioned there from the likes of NVIDIA, who grew earnings by 600% in Q3 2023. And I think what that tells us is that AI isn't just sort of a Wall Street hype, but it is really a revolutionary technology that is, and I think will continue to make big tech some serious cash.
Okay, so can they do it again? I mean, some of the poor performers of those big seven last year were sort of the Microsofts and Apples, which only rose 50% compared to NVIDIA, which was closer to 200%. Can they do it again?
I think so, but I don't think they lead into next year. We don't think the Magnificent Seven will see the same sort of returns that we did in sort of 2023. We mentioned sort of AI there, and I think that will remain front and center in 2024. We've got use cases exploding. We have consumer and corporate adoption continuing to grow. I think that means that we will see AI-driven spending continue. But we do see that there's going to be a bit of a rotation. Maybe it doesn't happen in Q1. Maybe it comes in sort of Q2, the closer that we get to sort of rate cuts. But what we're likely to see is that sort of rotation into cheaper and more depressed businesses that we sort of really saw in 2023 rather than those with sort of high valuations. But I think that given, big tech size, their cash balances and overall solid fundamentals, investors like owning them. So whether that's in periods of economic uncertainty, whether that's through sort of growth periods, I think that's what we're going to see in the early part of sort of 2024. And as I say, they're leading sort of the earnings recovery. These are the names, that have the biggest earnings growth at the moment. And I think that will help to continue driving their performance early in 2024. But as I say, we don't see it sort of leading the US stock returns in 2024.
Okay, then I have to ask you, what sectors do you like in the US outside tech?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, what we're looking at, as I say, is those sort of depressed businesses. So I think, rate sensitive sectors such as real estate, such as sort of financials. We do still believe that sort of tech is going to do well, but as I say, more so looking towards those depressed sort of sectors. As I say, financials, real estate, those types of names, maybe just sort of in the tech sector a little bit. I think there's going to be a big focus on cybersecurity. Not only are we shifting, to the cloud, but obviously if we think about AI, hacks, breaches, I think they're becoming more and more sophisticated. We saw 2 major breaches in Australia alone last year that sort of caught headline news. So I think there's going to be a real need for enterprises to protect their growing online data, their apps from these sort of bad actors and sort of malicious threats as well. So as I say, a bit of a focus towards financials and real estate. I think the US tends to be the sort of the country focus for investors. They look to it for sort of tech. But we're actually seeing investors, have a bit of a healthy contrarian allocation to sort of cyclical markets such as Europe, emerging markets, and maybe if they're feeling very contrarian, even sort of China.
Okay. And I mean, some of those markets, Europe and China, for example, haven't had a good run of it recently. So their valuation starting point in 2024 isn't too bad.
Absolutely. I mean, if we look at sort of China more specifically, the MSCI China index is trading at sort of 9 times forward earnings. And that's well below the average of sort of the last 20 years and compared to sort of the MSCI World Index, which is 17 times.
Yeah.
So much, much cheaper. But of course, that is obviously coming from an economy that has sort of really struggled. We've obviously got a real estate market there that, again, is in need for support. It could be at a bit of a slow start to the year, but we see stimulus measures that are coming from China that should start to bear fruit a little bit later in 2024.
Josh, thanks for talking to Fear and Greed Summer.
Thanks very much for having me.
That was Josh Gilbert, market analyst at social investment network eToro. Michael, keep an eye on the tech stocks, but others, REITs, real estate investment trusts, financials, bit of China. Certainly going to be an exciting year, 2024.
Yeah, great analysis. Great predictions. Great chat overall, actually. I thought that was terrific. Thanks very much, Sean.
Thanks, Michael.
Remember, this is general information only. You should seek professional advice before making investment decisions. That's it for today. Make sure you hit follow on the podcast. There's a new episode every day and regular business news back from January 15. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed.